episode of Unlocking the Secrets of Autism, and I'm here with my co-host Amy Dressler, Russ Raposa, and Karen Raposa, and we have a distinguished guest, Betsy Blanchette, and her bio reads as this. Betsy Blanchette is a school psychologist who has been working for Providence Public Schools for 27 years. She has been a member of the school department's district autism team for the past 14 years. Betsy is also a board-certified behavior analyst and is a license in both Rhode Island and Mass. She is recognized as a certified autism specialist through the International Board of Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards. Betsy attended Rhode Island College, obtaining a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology, Master of Arts degree in educational psychology, and Certificate of Advanced Graduate Study in School Psychology. She completed the coursework required for board certification as an applied behavior analyst through Florida Institute of Technology and completed her supervision experience through the J. Arthur Trudeau Memorial Center. So my first comment and question is that many kids need hospitalization. Parents don't know when to make it happen and how to make it happen. So the question is, what are the signs when a child needs hospitalization?
Well, I think there are some red flags that come up. One of the most predominant ones is aggression, or frequent aggression or destructive behaviors, as well as frequent self-injury, significant self-injury. Elopement sometimes can be, warrant hospitalization if there's frequent elopements. Also, significant and pervasive sleep disturbances, where kids are not sleeping at all. They're up for hours, for days on end. Sometimes they're just not sleeping. Another thing too that we tend to overlook a little bit is the fact that sometimes an individual may kind of fall out of their routines. They're withdrawing from family. They are not interested in those things that bring them a lot of pleasure. Almost.
They're
everyday things. So
okay.
Say if using the computer or their iPad or something that they really enjoy, or some other activity they really enjoy, and they tend to not want to participate in that, and they don't really seem to have any interest in anything, almost like a sign of depression. So those are kind of the red flags that you would see to say, like maybe my child needs some more intensive support or hospitalization.
Excuse my voice, but what's the best way to start that process, and what's available in this area besides Hasbro?
A lot of times the hospitalization basically is preceded by a significant crisis. You end up, the individuals in crisis, they're acting out, they're putting everyone at themselves or other people at significant risk, and it ends up being a 911 call with a transport, usually to Hasbro Children's Hospital around here. And then there's an assessment that's done by the on-call clinician to determine, whether there's a medical necessity for hospitalization. And then there's usually a wait for a bed, because Bradley Hospital has the CAD program, which has only a certain number of beds in that program, so they have to wait for an opening there. Butler Hospital also has a program. They have a program there. It's not quite as specialized as Bradley Hospital, but they do have an adolescent program there.
And the CAD unit is the Center for
Autism and Developmental Disabilities program.
Okay, Betsy, I have a question for you. What do you do to make the child calmer when they go off the walls, and how best to treat them to calm down?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it sounds intimidating in a way for someone who's involved in a crisis, but when a child or an individual is escalated and they're kind of off the walls or they're having a meltdown, the best thing you can do is stay calm. Try to keep yourself calm. I know it's hard to do when you're in the middle of a situation, but that's probably the key to helping them to helping them to de-escalate, is trying to keep yourself calm. Be aware of your tone of voice, how loud you're speaking, your body language, how much you're talking. You try to limit your talking, because you have to. When someone's that escalated, they're not really processing what you're saying, and sometimes that your voice can almost be like white noise, and it just continues to escalate them or escalates them more. The other thing is just to try to have a safe, quiet place, either that they can stay in, you can maybe get them to, or just kind of empty your, kind of everyone leave the room. And if there's anything that might be pose a danger that can be thrown or broken or whatever, you try to just kind of like clear that out really quickly and just try to monitor them. But I think the biggest thing is to try to stay calm, because if you're escalated, it's almost like fanning the flames of a fire. So that's where it becomes very challenging, especially for families. I think it's easier for someone that doesn't have as close of a relationship, that bond, to intercede and kind of be a little more neutral and kind of keep themselves in that calmer place than if it's your child that's having that meltdown, because you are emotionally invested with them. And it's very hard, I think, to see your child in that kind of distress, and also, seeing what's going on and knowing that they're putting themselves or someone else potentially in danger.
Betsy, it's, meltdowns are, as parents of children who have meltdowns,
Yes.
are very, very challenging for parents, as you've mentioned, and especially when it's happening in a public place. And so, I'm thinking, as our audience is listening to all of this about meltdowns, can you help our audience to understand or explain, meltdowns that people don't have control over, that necessarily, that there's not a way to make it stop,
Yes,
kind of
and I
has
think-
to take its course. I once heard it described as very similar to a seizure, in that you wouldn't see a change in the brain waves like you do with seizures, but meltdowns come out of nowhere like a seizure. You can't make them stop like you can't make a seizure stop, and really the only thing you can do is keep the person safe while it's happening like a seizure. Does that
You're right.
sound accurate?
Yes, you are accurate. And I think the key point here, that one of the key delineating things, is people see a meltdown and they equate that with a tantrum.
Yes.
And so when you look at a tantrum is a little bit different. A lot of times a child has control over that tantrum, and that tantrum is a means to an end. So they will either ramp up that tantrum to try to get what they want, but they'll stop once they achieve what they want, or they realize that it's not going to work for them. They will stop. So it's more under their control, and it's usually there's a trigger, and it's usually a denial of something. No, you can't have that. And you see it in the stores all the time, and I'm always like this champion behind a parent going, it's a tantrum, go for it, deny them, don't work through it. Just, what, it's fine. Don't care who's looking at you. Just try to work through it and get that little extinction burst and then move on, and then hopefully next time it won't happen. But a meltdown is different. A meltdown is more of a release of cortisol in the body. It's a flight or flight response. The automatic nervous system kind of takes control, and it's usually in response to an overwhelming situation, whether it's internal or external. It could be something external that's causing it, like an external stimuli, or it could be something internal. So you're right, it is. It just happens. Sometimes it seems like it happens out of nowhere, and it's so quick, and it's like 0 to 60. They're calm, and then all of a sudden they're in this huge escalation, and there's no way to stop it. And it's like this huge adrenaline rush. And I think as a parent of a child, or even the individual themselves, when they're having this meltdown in a public place, it's the aftermath of that. The kind of, when it's all over, you have all those hard feelings and the embarrassment and everything else. But it is true that they don't have control over the meltdown, and it needs to be looked at differently than a tantrum, because a tantrum is more under control, and a meltdown is not. So if someone's having a meltdown, you can't say, okay, here's the lollipop. Right. They won't stop.
Right.
Because they just can't stop it. It takes on a life of its own. And typically, a lot of times they have to exhaust themselves before they can finally calm down.
I find that with our son, sometimes he works himself into a frenzy. He builds up a sweat.
Yeah.
And he'll be biting, or he'll show some self-injurious behavior. And then it's just like losing a temper, and then it's completely gone, and he's fine and he's happy.
Yes.
Within a minute, he's fine.
Right. It's almost, if you kind of think of it, try to relate it to something that we're familiar with, because I always, it's always better to be able to have that relevance to it. It's almost, kind of like the road rage thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're calm, you're listening to your music, and then, you know, all of a sudden you're stuck in gridlock traffic, and then someone's like cutting you off,
Yeah.
and you feel yourself going from that calm state
Yeah.
to feeling really agitated.
Yeah.
You know, and some people go to the extreme,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
the road rage. But it's a similar thing.
Same thing.
It's a similar thing. It's just more intense.
Very
You
interesting.
know, those
That's a
mental.
great
But
analogy.
you
Yeah,
have
that
to
is a
think
good
of it
analogy.
in those terms. It's not something that we really have control all over. And you know, driving in our cars, you know, we're listening to music, everything's fine, and then, you know, we get into traffic. You know,
Yeah.
people are, you know, cutting us off, and
Yeah.
you know, or you know, almost hitting
True.
us, and then we get escalated, and then we get agitated.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
Then the
difficult
baseball
then you,
bat comes out.
yeah, for some people, you know, who knows? but you know, you're right though. It is out of the individual's control.
One of the things you said that I had not stopped to think about much was when you just said that when it's all over and done with, there can be feelings of almost a sense of remorse, and we sometimes really do see that in our son. And for me, that just validates that he, you know, did not intend to do what he did, and he's very conscious of what's happening, yet he has no control over it. And you do see almost, you know, that sense of remorse in his face. He's nonverbal, so he can't communicate what's going on, but
But
it's
there is, a
interesting.
lot of times there is that sense of remorse or that sense of embarrassment. I work with individuals on the spectrum who, you know, along, you know, with the whole spectrum of severity, so of symptoms. And I have some individuals that I work with that are very verbal, and they have a lot of insight, and they might have a meltdown, and you can talk about it afterwards. We can
must
kind
learn
of
so
we can kind
much
of talk
from
about it and
that.
say, okay, what happened, and they'll say, I couldn't deal with it. I didn't want to lose control. I tried not to, but it just happened. You know, so even if they have we have, you know, been working on strategies to try to keep ourselves calm. Even then, those strategies sometimes don't work. And they say, I was trying to stay calm. I just couldn't do it, and I just lost control. And I didn't want to do it. You know.
That's very helpful, I
Yeah.
think, for families who might be tuning in whose child is nonverbal, because you just don't have the insight that you have from working with people
Right.
who are verbal and who can explain what it feels like and why it's happening. So
Yeah. So
That's
it's a difficult thing that happens. You know, I think for the individual themselves and the family around them, you know, their family, and then other individuals that are in the environment when it occurs. Because it can be scary depending on the size of the individual, how intense it is. You know, it can be a little bit scary. You know, and I think too sometimes that it can be scary for the individual because they've lost control and they know it, and they can't regain it. And they're aware of that loss of control. And with a individual who is highly verbal that can't express that, they will say that it was kind of scary because I couldn't control it. I wanted to, but I couldn't. You know, and they feel themselves being out of control, and they know it. So.
I know you touched on it, Betsy, but could you elaborate a little more on, you know, how a parent can proactively, you know, keep their child from a meltdown in general?
I think some of the things that can be done are kind of environmentally based, you know, antecedent based, you know, having those routines. But also sometimes having those routines can be a catch-22 because if your child is very routine bound and now you have a change in the routine, especially if it's unexpected, that can lead to that feeling of being overwhelmed. So if you're using a visual schedule or you know, other visuals, what we try to tend to do is add in like a little zigzag or something like, oh, this is an unexpected thing. So we try to work that in kind of almost as a teaching tool. You know, it's like, oh, we had this little unexpected thing to get them accustomed to. You know, sometimes things don't go according to plan. You know, having the visual schedules helps. You know, the routines help. Having a lot of, you know, structure in the day, but also having those times, that downtime, because sometimes just going through the day can be overwhelming. You know, there are some students that can hold it together during school, but they come home, and if they don't have that downtime when they first get home, it's really hard for them for the rest of the afternoon, for the rest of the evening. So just having that time where they can just kind of regroup, kind of relax, cocoon, you know, do their thing, and then, okay, I'm ready to move on. So having that built in as well. Social stories sometimes can help so that, you know, if you're anticipating doing something new or, you know, something that's challenging, you introduce a social story and you read that proactively. So, you know, so that in preparation for it, so that they know what's to come and what to expect and, you know, what the expectations are.
So can you elaborate more and help our audience if they're not familiar with what a social
Oh,
story
sure.
is?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Social stories were kind of the creation of Carol Gray. And there's a recipe for them where you have the declarative and directive sentences. And the recipe is 2 declaratives to 1 directive sentence. They're typically written in the first person. And, it's introducing what's coming up. You might say, sometimes if it's the first person, my name is Johnny. I go to school every day. Sometimes it's hard for me to get ready. Sometimes it's hard for me to get ready for school and to get dressed and to get on the bus. And then mom helps me. And then you might say something like the expectation, the directive would be, I will try to follow mom's directions, or I will try to, follow my schedule and be ready when the bus comes. Just things like that, some very simple things like that. Or if it's a doctor's visit, what to expect in the doctor's visit. These are the things that are going to happen. I will try to stay calm when they listen to my heart. I will try to stay calm when they put the blood pressure, when they try to take my blood pressure. Those kinds of things. So it kind of gives them an idea of what to expect, what the expectations are. Of what they're going to experience, and also what the expectation is for them, what we want them to do in that situation.
And how about first then types of visuals?
Yes,
Those
first thens work well.
Helpful. So it's
Yes.
just a picture of first. If you're at the doctor's or dentist, first we've got to do this.
Yes.
But then this is the
You
good
build in that
thing that
reinforcement.
we're going to do
It's payday.
when we're done. Yeah.
I always think of it as payday, and people always say, "Oh, you're bribing them." I'm like, no, we're not bribing them. We're motivating. And I'll say, well, you go to work. Are you expecting a paycheck?
There you
Are
go.
you expecting the paycheck at the end
Yeah,
of the
that's
week or
great
whatever your pay
advice.
period is?
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like we just have to motivate them. So yes, we have a reinforcement system built in place. It might be a first then, or it might be for someone that can do a token system. It might be you earn so many tokens and then you can cash them in. But again, sometimes you have to build in that incentive, that motivation to do something, especially if it's something that's going to be mundane, or it's going to be difficult or challenging, or it's going to be a little scary, or it's something new. We have to try to help them. And the first then works really well because it's right there. It's kind of like black and white. You can take you can take the spoken language out of it. You can just point sometimes, just like first this, then that. And then if they're having a difficult time, just kind of first. Or you can say, oh, what are you earning? You're earning this? Great. That's okay. Let's earn it. So always trying to stay positive. Looking at things from a positive perspective. Those helps too. And then if it's something that, say if you're going to the doctors and you have to have your blood pressure checked, or you have to have blood drawn because some of the individuals on the spectrum have medications that they need to have blood levels checked. And so there's actually I found online years ago, I think it was B Visual was the website, a blood draw kit, practice kit.
Oh,
so it had everything in it but
that's a
the
good one.
actual needle,
Yeah.
but it had everything else in it.
It's a really
And
good
so
idea.
and I had a client at the time doing home base. And one of the goals that the family had was for his blood pressure to be able to be checked and for him to be able to have a blood draw without being either mechanically or pharmacologically restrained. And so we worked on that. And so I found this blood draw kit. I said, we can work on that. So I found it. I said, this is perfect. It has everything I need in it. It doesn't have the needle in it, which we don't need. We don't need that. Right? But so we
don't have to
practiced it,
complicate the
and we
thing.
basically kind of desensitized. So it's almost like those successive approximations. So we kind of brought the kit one day. We just explored it. We looked at it. We kind of played with things a little bit, and then we gradually kind of just I just kind of put the tourniquet, the little rubber tourniquet, just kind of gently just wrapped it around his arm, and then I had him do that with me. And then we get to the point where we just kind of tied it very loosely, and gradually, and the little alcohol wipes would just wipe there, and like the little tap, and just then we gradually worked on it. And we worked on it over about a course of 6 months. And so I would have him put do it to me. I would do it to him. It was just like this little game we would play. And then I was fortunate enough, I guess, that I had to have blood work done for my annual physical. So when we went for his blood work, we went to the lab, and so when we got to the lab, we kind of said, okay, well, I have blood work. He has blood work. He's my client. I'd like to go first, and I would like him to watch me. And they kind of looked a little, but they were very accommodating. They were great. They were really great. The texts were great. So they said, well, it's unusual, but sure, we'll let you do this. But, so I had my blood draw done, and he was watching me. And then it was his turn. So he got right in the chair. He did his whole thing, and he was fine. He put the tourniquet on, and he was fine until one of the techs wanted to hold his arm still so he wouldn't move it.
Oh.
And so as soon as she tightened, she kind of like firmly held his arm, he started to struggle. And so right away, but they were really good. So right away I said, just let go. Can you please, and I said to him, can you please just let go? And he calmed down. So I talked, and so they just kind of let him calm down for a little bit. And then I said to them, I said, I don't know how comfortable you are with this, but will you allow me to keep his arm stable? And she kind of looked and she said, well, if it's all right with his mom, because, we don't want anything to, because they're inserting the needle. And she kind of looked at Mom, and Mom said, I'm fine with that. And so we said, okay. And so all I did is I put my hand on his shoulder. I just kind of put my hand on his shoulder, and I put my other hand very gently on his bicep. And then he watched the blood draw, and he was fine.
Wow.
But we also
That's
had
amazing.
yes,
That
and it
is
was because I wasn't sure if we were gonna actually be successful, and we were. And of course, we had already arranged our first then that he was gonna get his blood drawn, and then he was gonna go out to breakfast, one of his favorite breakfast spots. So he knew he was earning. So he knew he was earning breakfast.
That when the needle was introduced, it wasn't a deal breaker.
Right. What the deal breaker was though was the
touching the
tight
arm.
was
Yeah.
was
That
the
wasn't in
was
the-
the was
attempt to restrain.
was the holding of his arm firmly.
Yeah.
And that
Interesting.
put him into, and that just kind of set that
that
reaction.
wasn't part of
was
what
just-
you practiced.
Right,
That
either,
wasn't part of
so-
what we practiced. And he did have a sense, and I think too that maybe brought back some memories of
Right.
of prior blood draws where he was restrained.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were really good, and they allowed us to do that, and we were successful.
Pretty good.
Maybe we can
were
put on our
successful.
website where to find the kit.
I can see if that's
Yeah,
if
that'd
it's
be
still
great.
available.
I
I
know a
think
lot
it
of
was
people-
called
I've
Be
got
Visual,
one.
and like I said, it took us about 6 months of practice, and we just went very slowly, kind of went at his pace. And gradually made the tourniquet a little tighter, a little tighter, a little tighter. So he was used to that because I knew he was somewhat pressure sensitive. Till we get to the point where it was kind of tight, and we would only leave it on just briefly, and then undo it, and then he would, I get it tied on for me, and he would pull it because he also had CP, so he had some motor difficulties. But we kind of practiced for a long time, and then we also practiced the blood pressure. So I went out and I bought
And
one of
that's
those
another thing,
like
very
home blood pressure.
restrictive. That's very restrictive.
Right. So we did one of those home blood pressure monitors. It inflates and all that stuff. So we did that because it has this little button where you can make it stop. So we did that, and of course I would put, of course, me first. So I put my arm in it, and he would push the button and tighten it up and everything, and we would go through. And just let it take my blood pressure, and then it was my turn to try it on him. And of course, as soon as it would start to inflate, I'd hit the button to make it stop. And we'd how does it
How
feel?
about dental visits? For visits to the dentist, I mean,
Yeah, I mean-
when Brent went to the dentist, they put some tools in his mouth just to
Yes.
get him used to it.
Yeah.
But
You get
it was-
plastic
Yeah.
tools.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you probably could find something, online, or if you could even with your, with your dentist office,
Right. Sure
So,
she can get that.
I mean, you could probably maybe come up with something that could be a useful tool for
Not real,
that
but
process.
similar.
Right, not real, but similar, where families or clinicians could access the kit, and then they could practice what it's like
I
to be in
really
the
do need
dentist's
to
office.
create
there's
one
a-
because I tell them what to put in a box or in a, and that's part of what I teach.
Yes.
But I really need to actually create that kit.
Yeah.
So I think that would be helpful for like a dentist visit, so that they can be familiar with the tools and what they feel like in their mouths. And even like, you're having a dentist visit, they're sticking their hands in your, gloved hands, but they're sticking their hands in your mouth, and they're asking you to like open your mouth, close
Yeah.
your teeth.
Yeah.
So it's pretty invasive. And,
It
if you have a child that has, that's a little sensory defensive, and or orally defensive, and you're trying to do dental work, it can be very
And a lot of it
challenging,
is about practicing the oral hygiene at
Yes.
home. If they're not allowing
Yes.
that, then it's not realistic to think they're going to allow some stranger when they're not allowing the people who are with them all the time. So a lot of that starts at home.
Yes, it does. And then, couple that with a social story. And you introduce the social story, you introduce, the kit and all, and just, let them explore it. You just explore it, and then, a lot of times, like, okay, do it to me. Okay, now it's my turn to do it to you. Almost make it like a fun thing.
Yeah.
So it's low key and it's not too stressful. And then when they get into the dentist chair, and I think the thing too would be trying to you need a
Reducing a lot of
recliner.
the input.
Do you have a
You got to
recliner?
reduce
Do
the
it in a
light, you
recliner.
got to reduce the sounds,
Right.
and there's a lot of stuff that.
Yeah, there
Can
are a
be
lot of things
helpful.
to think about with a dentist visit, and it can be very challenging. And even just dental hygiene can be very challenging.
It's challenging for typical people.
Yes.
Right, that's right. It's anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety going to a doctor or
Oh, yeah.
dentist.
Yes.
White coat syndrome, right? People's blood pressure goes up when they go to the doctor.
You know, I have that.
Yes, white
I do.
white
Yeah.
coat
I go
syndrome.
White coat syndrome, right?
140 over whatever,
Yeah.
and then a few minutes later, Doctor takes it again, it's 120/80.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right, and you may not even have realized that you were feeling anxious or anything, but your automatic nervous system
Yeah,
was
just
kicking in,
anticipating,
was kicking in. That's why your blood pressure went up. You know,
Yeah.
so
No, I found that with our child, that when he hit puberty, it was like the worst time as
It
far
can be.
as, everything was off the charts. It was like very difficult to handle.
It
And
can
that was
be.
his worst time. And now he's 18, he's much better and he's fine and
Yes.
he's grown out of, are you finding that same thing? That
puberty
time?
a lot of times is, I mean, it's challenging for typically developing adolescents, puberty. But then, you add in, some of the challenges with autism. And I think
he's
it really makes it
nonverbal.
in nonverbal. And so, your body's changing, you're getting these different feelings, you're not understanding them. So it can be very scary, I think, at
Yeah, I think
times.
so.
There's a lot of hormonal changes. I know, especially with girls, sometimes we start to see, we're tracking data and we start to see, these escalations, and we say, hey, wait a minute. We saw this last month. She's not menstruating yet, but let's start tracking this, And then we start tracking. We say, yep, here's the pattern. And then when they do start menstruating, and then we say, here's the pattern. Oh, she's menstruating. Okay, things are calm again. So, but again, it seems to be there does seem, but when you think about it as women, we know, right, that those hormonal changes sometimes
no
can be
control.
challenging.
Yeah.
We get
How it makes
irritable.
you feel, yeah.
We get irritable. We have cravings. And it is challenging. But we are aware of what's going on. But some individuals, especially individuals that have lower cognitive functioning or significant communication difficulties, it's very difficult for them to understand or be able to relay that information to them. But we see it with boys too, though. There's a lot of body changes that go on. I've seen kids that start plucking. They're just sitting there. Because they don't like the
Something really
hair.
different, and they're like,
It's the hair just started, like having this
Right.
extra hair. They start to they're just sitting there
Pulling hair,
Yeah,
yeah.
trichomania. Just they start all of a sudden out of nowhere they start pulling their hair out.
Wow.
But it seems to be related to those body changes. Or when girls have to start wearing bras, and
Right.
that if they have that sensitivity to pressure or being
Yeah.
restricted, it's very
Texture,
difficult.
yeah.
It's very difficult. So you start with something really loose and you just have them wear it for a couple minutes and then take it off. And then even with girls with menstruating, if you have to, it's better to prepare them. And again, it's just that desensitizing. So you start off with a panty liner and you have them wear it for a little while. And then you move up to, bigger pad and stuff. So that way there, when they do start their period, they're used to having, having that feeling of the, the pad and everything. So it's easier for them.
Wow.
Well,
So
Never
we've
thought
done
about the challenges with girls versus
Yes.
boys.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, there are a lot of
How about-
challenges. There are a lot of challenges.
I think this is, we had a wonderful evening, and I think that this concludes our 7th episode of Unlocking the Secrets of Autism. We wish thanks. We wish
thank you.
thanks,
Yeah, thanks.
Betsy, and
Oh, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you
we
so much.
appreciate
Thank you.
you coming.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for inviting me. It was nice to be here and to have
very
this conversation with
informative.
you.
Really.